Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you new here, my name's Nicki, I'm an author and editor and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading and all the things I love. And today we're doing a writing tag, an AuthorTube tag. And this one is called My Writing Process, and I don't have a note of the creator on my paperwork here, but I will try to find it to add to the spiel below. If you don't see those details and you know who created it, do drop me a comment because I'd like to credit, if I can, in the right place. So without any further ado, we've got 20 questions, so I'm going to move straight on with them. Number one, what genres do you write? I actually write across a lot of genres. I would say predominantly paranormal and fantasy, but I've done sci-fi. Some of my paranormal stories are also historical. I've done contemporary stories, so it really is a bit of everything. It just depends which story ideas come to me. Number two, what settings gets you the most productive? I don't think there is a particular one. I mean, I do enjoy writing books set in England, set in London, because it's a place I'm familiar with, and I love London. I think it's a wonderful place, and it's always fun to travel back there. Even though I now live on the other side of the world, I can travel back there in my books. Number three, if you have multiple story ideas, how do you pick which one to start first? Generally, I'd go with the one I feel most inspired for, but it can vary, and I can work on multiple ones at once, because I might start one and then I might sort of lose the vibe for that one a bit, but I'll pick up a different one instead, work on that, and then I'll get the vibe back for the original one. So it does tend to vary. I don't stick to just one work at a time. I actually quite like having a couple on the go, just so I've got that chance to move between them depending on what I'm feeling inspired for that day. Number four, do you outline? No. The most I'll do are a few little vague story notes. I'm talking like a couple of sentences, a paragraph or so, of roughly where I think the story is going to begin, go and end. But I tend to leave the middle fairly open, and I just write the story as it comes to me. Five, do you start your first draft with pen and paper, typewriter or computer? Pen and paper these days. It used to be computer, but because I do so much computer work, particularly with my editing work as well, or my online stuff, I was on the computer for far too long. So I have gone back to pen and paper for the first draft, which I'll type up. I don't like having to type it all up at once at the end, so I type it up, you know, once I've written a chapter or two, I'll type it up and go back to the pen and pad and back on from there. So mostly pen and pad for the first draft. Number six, what do you do to get through writer's block? Well, I've kind of already answered that in that I have a few works on the go, so if I'm a bit blocked in one, hopefully I can write something else instead. And this sun has suddenly gone down outside, so I might have got suddenly dark on this video, and I apologise if I've suddenly slipped into shadow. I'm hoping it's going to just like be behind a cloud for a second and come back out again. Number seven, do you format your project from the beginning or worry about that later? I format it from the beginning, especially if I know to whom I'm going to be submitting it, which publisher, so I can set it up for their preferences. Otherwise I have a kind of generic one that would fit most publishers' preferences that you only need to tweak a bit at the end, but it's so much easier if you're just doing it the right way to begin with. 8. Do you edit as you go or when you're finished with the first draft? I'd like to say when I finish with the first draft, but I do find it difficult not to do some editing as I go, because I obviously am typing it up from what I've written on the pen, with the pen and pad, and I think I try not to get too involved. As I'm typing, I might tweak a few things, but I do try not to really go heavy on the edits until I've got the entire story down. 9. After finishing your drafts, how long do you give a break before you start going back over it? That will vary from story to story depending on what I'm writing it for. Obviously, if I'm writing for a call, I may be very restricted on time, that I have to get the story finished and completed and submitted within 3 weeks or something, and so I don't have time to leave the story for that long. However, if I have the option to do so, I do like to leave it for at least a month, maybe 2, just to give myself time to forget about it a bit so I can come to it with fresh eyes again. Number 10, is there something you prefer to do to get you through writing, e.g. playing music, favourite drinks? No, I don't like any sound of any kind when I'm writing. Even though I'm a huge music lover usually, I can't write when there's music on. I do sometimes make myself a nice cup of tea, being British, but other than that, no, I just prefer to sit quietly in my comfy chair, no one around, no distractions. Number 11, do you schedule your writing sessions? No, just because my life doesn't really doesn't really allow for that very easily. I try to, insofar as if I've got a day I'm at home all day, I try to say by late afternoon up until dinner time I'll write, but it doesn't always work out. Sometimes I've got too much other stuff to do and I don't get to it. So in theory I'd like to, but it doesn't usually happen quite the way I planned. Number 12, do you have a word count or chapter goals for your writing sessions? No, I find that puts far too much pressure on myself and then I don't get anything written if I'm totally panicking about a word count. Ideally, if I'm going to have about an hour and a half or so, then I'd hope to draft a chapter. I mean, based on my usual chapter lengths, I'd hope to draft a chapter, but at worst I'd get it done over 2 days. Number 13, are there quirky things you do to make your projects more fun? No, not really. I mean, I do character sheets, profile my characters, but that's more about getting to know the character well than having fun. Occasionally I do a little bit of artwork or something that maybe has inspired me from the story, but not as a matter of course. Number 14, do you work on multiple projects at once? I do sometimes. Again, it's not every time, but it just depends what I'm writing, what I've got going on, how much time I've got. Number 15, how often do you research what you're writing? That will really vary from project to project. Generally, I've not written anything so far that's required absolutely masses of major research, but sometimes something will come up in the story and I think, oh, I need to know a little bit about that in order to describe it better, in which case I'll just research it either as I go or more likely at the second draft stage. So I've got that first draft out, I identify parts where I want to be able to put a bit more detail about something in that I need to research, and then I'll do that research as I'm doing that first major round of edits. Number 16, how do you organise your projects? It depends what you mean by that. I mean, I have behind the camera there my ongoing projects at the moment, so each of them has a small A4 file where I print out as I go as well the first draft, so that once I get to the end of the first draft I've got a full printout ready. I prefer to print it a little bit at a time than bash the printer with like a huge 200 page load at the end. It's only a little home printer. I also have obviously the notebook that I'm using for each of those stories there with a pen, and I also organise my writing in my bullet journal. I keep track of my projects on there, and I also keep track of stuff once it's at a submission and accepted stage in Excel spreadsheets and the like. Number 17, do you reward or punish yourself for achieving or missing your goals? Not really, no. I mean, sometimes when I've got a book completely finished and submitted, I might treat myself to a little cake or something like that, but not as a rule do I do any sort of major treats or certainly not punishments as I go along. Number 18, are any works similar to your projects that you look for and use for inspiration or comparison? Actually, I'd say the opposite. If I think there's something that's similar to my project, I won't read it or watch it or do anything like that while I'm writing, because I'd be worried that it would influence me too much. For example, I was writing a superhero story and I'd come across the TV series Heroes, if I speak properly, on Netflix, and I'd never seen it. And I was really, really eager to watch it, but I didn't watch it until after I'd finished the first draft of my story, because I was worried that otherwise I'd start writing stuff from the show into my story without even meaning to, just because I was being subconsciously influenced by what I was seeing. So I waited until after I'd finished writing until I watched it. Number 19, how early do you wait to start looking for and hiring editors? Mostly that's out of my hands. I've self-published a couple of works, but mostly I'm working with small presses, so they handle all the editing side of things and they assign the editors and send the work off according to their publication schedule, so it's not really a factor for me. 20. If you've finished a first draft or manuscript, tell us how you felt afterwards. It's always a wonderful feeling every time you finish a first draft, and even more so when you've done all the editing and you've got that final polished version ready. You do get a huge sense of accomplishment, and why not? You've put a load of work into it. It's your baby and you've spent hours and hours of your life on it, so you ought to feel accomplished for having finished. So that was the tag. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to pop the questions and everything below for you, if in case you'd like to have a go at it yourselves. I will be back again very soon with another video, but for now I'll say goodbye everyone.